All right, so slope is the steepness of a line. So slope is the steepness of a line, how steep a line is. That means the larger the slope, the larger that number for your slope, the steeper your line. We use the letter M to represent slope. So if I have two slopes, I say M is 5 or M is 1/3. So I have two different lines. One has a slope of 5, and one has a slope of 1/3. To figure out which one is steeper, well, the larger the slope, the steeper the line. So which number is larger, 5 or 1/3? 5. So 5 is going to be steeper. This line will be steeper than the 1/3. We also call slope rate of change. So we might ask you to find the slope, or we might ask you to find the rate of change. They mean the same thing. So we're going to find the slope from 3 different ways. The first way is from a graph. Okay, so you're going to be given a graph. You need to locate 2 points on that graph, and we'll talk about that in a second, what that means exactly. Once you have those 2 points, you're going to use rise over run. So that means you're going to count how many you rise, up or down, and then how many you run, left or right. If you rise up, or if you run right, those are going to give you positive numbers. If you rise down or if you run left, those will give you negative numbers. So if you rise up and run left, you have a positive and a negative, and one positive and one negative will give you a negative answer. If you rise down and run left, well, you'll have a negative, and 2 negatives would give you a positive. So here's an example. The first step says to find 2 points on the graph. So if we come over and look at the second graph real quick, it has 2 nice points already given to you. So you would just count your rise and your run from those 2 points. If 2 points aren't given to you directly on your graph, you're going to look for a nice intersection somewhere on your coordinate plane. So if I look right here, see how that is crossing nicely at a nice XY coordinate point? I'm going to put a point there. If I look again, I can see another one right here. It crosses nicely at that XY, so I'm going to put a point there. So this is not a nice point. It's not crossing at a nice XY axis or XY coordinate point. Same here, that's not crossing nicely. You can keep looking, keep going down your line. Look, there it crosses again. So you could have picked this point. You just need 2, any 2. Okay, so we're going to use these 2 that I have. So put points on each of those. Now we're using rise over run. So you're going to pick a point to start at, and it doesn't matter. You're going to go from one to the other. Okay, so let's start with this top one. You're going to count your rise, which is how far up or down. So you're going from this point to the second point, and when I rise, I'm going down. And I'm going down to this point right here because that's when I get in line with that other point. So now I'm going to count 1, 2, 3. But I went down, which is negative, so I rise -3. Now I'm going to count my run from where I left off to the other point. So from here, I'm going to count to the point, and I go 1, 2, and I went to the right, which is positive, so my run is a +2. Now we're going to make a fraction out of that. Put our rise over our run. So our rise is -3 over our run is +2. Your slope always needs to be a whole number or a fraction, and make sure it's an improper fraction like this, not a mixed fraction, but don't have decimals. So after you get your slope set up, you just need to see if it can reduce or simplify. So negative 3 over 2, well, negative 3 is not divisible by 2, so I can't simplify it. And then I'm going to check 3 over 2 and see if I can reduce it, but I can't. So that is my slope, negative 3 over 2. Now let's go back and look at this again real quick. And let's say I wanted to start at the bottom point and go to the top point. I want to show you how it's going to be the same. Okay, so rise over run. So from this bottom point, I'm going to rise to get in line with my other point. This time I rise and I go up. So 1, 2, 3 for my rise, but up is positive. Now from where I left off, I'm going to count my run. So from here to the other point, I ran 1, 2, but this time I went left, which is negative. Now when I put my rise over my run, rise over run, those are the exact same. I have one negative. Being in the numerator versus the denominator for your negative is the same. So negative 3 over 2 is the same as 3 over negative 2. As long as you have one negative in one of those locations, they're the same. So it doesn't matter which point you start at. So now you're going to come over here and you're going to do this practice example. Pause the video here, do this one, and then go check to see that you did it right before you continue with the video. All right, now we're going to do our slope from 2 points. So if I give you 2 coordinate points like we have down here, you're going to use the formula slope equals y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Some of you maybe have just heard y minus y over x minus x. It's the same formula. Change in y over change in x, that's what we're finding. Okay? So, your next step, once you know your formula, which you need to make sure you memorize this, memorize your slope formula. Once you know your slope formula, you're going to take your 2 points. You're going to plug the x value from the first point in for x1. And the x value from the second point in for x2. Then you're going to plug the y value for the first point into y1 and the y value from the second point into y2. Then you're just going to use your calculator and reduce your fraction. So y2 is the second y value, so I'm going to look at my second coordinate point and the y value is 0. So I'm going to take 0 minus, because that's my formula, minus. Then y1 says take the first y value, which is 4, all divided by the second x value, which is negative 1, minus the first x value. Now, notice that these have to be minus signs when you set up your formula. So if this was a negative 4, I would have 0 minus negative 4. Okay, make sure you would have 2 negatives there because the formula says a minus, and if your point had a negative for its coordinate point, you need a negative in there. Okay, but ours doesn't, so we can just keep going from there. Now, you can just type this in your calculator if you want, or you should maybe do some simplifying first and then reduce it in your calculator. So 0 minus 4, if you need a calculator, get a calculator. 0 minus 4 is negative 4 divided by negative 1 minus 3. Again, if you need a calculator, you can get a calculator. Negative 1 minus 3 is negative 4. Then, just like we talked about back up here, you need to see if your slope can simplify or can reduce. So you should always start by seeing if you can do negative 4 divided by negative 4. See if it can actually divide nicely. But if it can't, then reduce your fraction. Remember, Desmos would help you do that. So negative 4 divided by negative 4. Well, 2 negatives make a positive, and 4 divided by 4 is 1. So our slope is 1. Okay, now you're going to pause the video again and try the second one, and then check it with a key. All right, the last way we're going to find our slope is from a table. It is the exact same as how you found it from 2 points. The only difference is if you look at your table, you've got a lot of points. And if you remember back from the front page, you just had 2 points. So with a table, you get to pick 2 points from your table. but make sure they're coordinate points. So when I come down and I look at my table, I have the coordinate point 3, 2. I have the coordinate point 4, 5. I have the coordinate point 5, 8. So pick a pair of coordinate points. So if you want to pick 3, 2, that's a coordinate point. And then maybe you want to pick 5, 8. That's a coordinate point. So you're dealing with 3, 2 and 5, 8. Now you're going to solve this just like you did on the front. So you should be able to finish this one up just like you did on the front and do this second problem. You get to pick which coordinate points you pick, okay? But make sure you have a pair like we had here. Make sure you have a pair of coordinate points. Okay, so finish up this first one and then do the second one. All right, the last thing you're going to do is we're going to talk about horizontal and vertical lines. So you have a line right here. You have this horizontal line here, and you have this vertical line here. You are going to find your slope of each of those, and you're going to find your slope the same way you did on the graphs on the front. You're counting your rise over your run. So put 2 points on the first graph, put 2 points on the second graph, count how much do you rise over how much you run, and then simplify your slopes. And here's the thing, definitely on this one, whatever you get, plug it in your calculator. See what your calculator tells you on that, okay? Then you should finish reading up this bottom part here and look at Mr. Slope Guide, and if you need me to talk about him, I will.